What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another movie review. I'm Chase Lee, and the movie I want to take a look at right now is Gretel and Hansel. Now, this one comes from Orion Pictures, is directed by Osgood Perkins, and this one tells a story, and I'm sure people have read it growing up, where they read it as Hansel and Gretel. This is Gretel and Hansel. It's the same story, they just switched the titles for obvious reasons, but I'm not going to get into that because that's spoiler territory. But two kids that live with their mom in the countryside, they kind of live in isolation. There's not a lot of people around them. So it looks like it gets very, very, very lonely. And so the mother explains to Gretel that she needs, more food, and there's not enough work to go around. And so Gretel takes it upon herself and takes her little brother Hansel, goes deep into the woods and tries to find some work and some foods, clothes, just whatever to help her family out. She runs into this house. It's a very nice house, but it looks very suspicious from the way it looks. It looks a little evil. They get to the house, they look through the window, they see that there's a cornucopia of just food on this table, and so Hansel breaks in, tries to eat it, but the owner of the house catches him and just like, listen, if you're going to do that, you need to work here, and then I can feed you, clothe you, shelter you, whatever you need, I got you, but you can't be stealing. So she takes them in, and as they keep eating all this food and listening to this person about her life stories and just life lessons, Gretel's having some night terrors, and she keeps waking up seeing images of children and other people in the woods and in the house. And so she's like, listen, something's up. This house is like evil, you know what I'm saying? And so she realizes that there's something wrong with the house and Hulda, and she wants to try to get her and Hansel out of there before something bad happens to them. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending of the story if you've never read Hansel and Gretel. That is for you if you want to go into the movie as blind as possible. So, going into the movie for me personally, I liked the trailers. It reminded me of The Witch. It looked like it was going to be this slow burn, really kind of psychologically effed up horror film that gets under your skin and creeps you out for days, even after you see it. I was totally down for that. And as a kid reading the story, I always envisioned what this movie might look like as a live action piece of entertainment, even though there are many adaptations out there. I haven't done my research on it, but I'm sure there's some movies that were made for $10 out there that are also named Hansel and Gretel based on the same source material. But this is the first one I think I've ever seen get a wide release like this. I could be wrong, but whatever. Okay, what's really frustrating about this movie is that there's a lot of great things about it and there's a lot of bad things about it. And what frustrates me is that they're so good in the positives and they're kind of mediocre to bad in the negatives. It just evens out to the middle. And I'm like, they put so much effort over here, not as much over here, but like so much effort only to get them to what I think is just a middle of the road movie. And that's so frustrating because like there's a lot of great things about this. So with that being said, you already know which grade I'm going to give it, but let me go ahead and give you my reasonings why. So with the positives, if you guys have seen the trailers for it, the cinematography is lush. It's dark. It's saturated. It feels lonely and creepy. It just provides so much atmosphere to the film that each frame that is in this film, your eye can kind of wander and just like, oh, look, that's really cool. Like, look at that prop in the background. Like, that's really awesome on how they framed that. Or look at the colors in this one. It's just, the cinematography is fantastic and really just provides that reassurance of a grim fairy tale in live action form. It looks like it, and it really kind of fits the story that we're given, especially how dark it gets towards the end of the narrative. But yeah, dude, this thing looks fantastic. I have nothing but great things to say about it in that department. The production design and the costume design are killer. Like every single thing that has to do with their clothing, or the way Hulda's house looks, or the way Gretel and Hansel's house looks, the way that Hulda's house has different floors to it, and the further you go down, the creepier it gets. Everything about this movie, built into a set, it's great. It provides, the fictitious fairy tale look to it, so it doesn't even look like it's a real story. These are just made up people, but it also looks like this could happen to people, like if they went into a house in the woods. Like, it's wild. But yes, those are really great aspects to it. And the last thing I'll say before I get into the negatives is that I am happy they went as dark as they could. This thing goes beyond that PG-13 barrier just a little bit, and I like the fact that they dipped their toes on the other line of the R rating, because this movie got dark, and it got dark very quick, and I'm just glad they were able to push their limits as much as possible, and that was really awesome, especially with me as a horror fan. I like seeing that stuff. So the negatives. I will say this one first, and I'll kind of lead up into the bigger issues with the film, but this film is not mainstream, and there's going to be people that walk out. I was in a theater of 20 people. 4 people walked out. A fifth of the audience walked out before the third act of the film, which is in some regards probably the best part about the movie. But by that point, they were just so bored, they had to go. Because this movie is a slow burn, and it does take its time with people in, scenes just kind of sitting there and contemplating, or like taking a long time to say their lines. Like, that's just the rhythm that this movie is going in. So it's going to test a lot of people's patience. This is not an Annabelle Comes Home or The Nun or Truth or Dare or, any other jump scary PG-13 horror film that you've seen in the past few years. If you like those movies, that's great. But just know that this movie is not like that. And so if you're thinking about seeing this, just know that going in. You may not like the way this movie is presented or the way it moves, because it moves at a snail's pace. And I like that kind of rhythm to a certain extent. Like, if you watch stuff like The Witch, it takes the same kind of approach. I thought that movie was more fascinating with its lore and its characters and just the implications of like religion and stuff. Like, there was a lot of things going on with that movie that made me like perk up and be invested the whole way through. So I just want to say it goes against the grain. So leading into the pacing of the film, for 87 minutes, this movie gets in and gets out. But the problem is, it moves at such a slow pace, you can definitely tell they're trying to stretch out the story as much as they can. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because this would work well as a short film. If you made this into a very compactful, like 45 minutes, this movie would have been great. It really would have, but you're stretching out to an hour and a half, and it's not even an hour and a half, it's an hour and 27 minutes, but you minus 5 to 10 for the credits. It's not even that long. And so when you stretch out stuff like that and you linger on establishing shots, or you linger on people walking to a certain destination, and you realize that they could have cut, half of that out just to make their point and move on. It's just, the pacing does bring this movie down a bit for me. I don't mind the approach they took. I really don't. But was not invested, and it's really hard to drag the story out into a folding feature, and you can definitely see that they try to do that. Didn't really work so well. And then another thing is the acting. I didn't really care for anybody. Like, I don't think anyone was atrocious, but no one was great. Like, everyone was just kind of reading their lines and just coasting. Like I said, it's not bad or great. It's just, they're just coasting. Sophia Lillis plays Gretel. I've seen her in better stuff. The It films, Sharp Objects. She's in better stuff. Samuel Leakey, he plays Hansel. Okay. The lady that plays Hulda, Alice Cridge. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She looked like she was having a little fun with her role in that house and just her backstory and everything, but it's just coasting. I don't know. I didn't really care for the acting, and that also leads me to another problem with it, and is the voiceover. That felt like an afterthought. It didn't even feel like it was a part of the movie. It felt like it was just injected at the last second. It doesn't provide any more context to the story. It's just fluff dialogue that's just being spouted out to us, and it's being philosophical. And it's like, that's not really necessary. Like, I'm cool with just watching when I'm watching. I don't need the VO. And I think the biggest issue with the film, and I'll just lead off in this review with this, the story and the characters. I mentioned that it was drawn out to an hour and a half just to draw it out and pad that runtime. But oh man, when you really kind of dissect the Hansel and Gretel story, even with these small little changes that they added into this movie, it's just not enough. because the small little changes don't even happen until like the last like 10 minutes anyways. And they don't do enough to enhance the story, bring it to a modern audience. It's just, it is Hansel and Gretel, and they add a few little things, but it's just not interesting because you're trying to draw it out to this runtime that doesn't even justify the story in its length. And so I was never invested. I never cared about these people or their safety. It was just like, this was more of a visual treat to look at more than actually caring about what was going on. And so it's a real disappointment in that regard. I wish they would have explored stuff a little bit more, explored the minor changes that they added to it. But they didn't. They cut the movie off and it goes to credits, and it's just like, come on, guys. So yeah, it's really hard for me to say that. And the score is really great too. That goes in the good category. But evens out. So a lot of good, a lot of bad. I don't really care to see this movie again, but I'll give it a C. It is what it is. If you like kind of weird, slow burn movies that go against the grain, check it out. I'd still say give it a watch. If you are not a fan of those and you were expecting a more like, high profile horror film, this is not it. So just know that going in. So that's my thoughts on Gretel and Hansel. What did you guys think? Please comment down below and let me know. That will do it for this review, guys. I'm Chase Lee, and tune in next time for whatever I review next. I will see you guys later. And one last little nugget. Orion, if you're listening to this review, keep making movies. I'm glad that you guys are ramping up and doing more stuff. So keep that up. Keep doing weird stuff like this because I like it. I like when people walk out of the movie and they don't know what to expect. So keep it up, Orion. But yeah, that'll do it for this review. Comment down below. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and I'll see you guys next time.